Okay, the rule of Sunday mornings at KTC, stay hydrated. And thanks to the folks who helped me with that. All right, so in any case, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming and being here with us today. I'm going to start with some audience participation before we get to our prayer. Because this way I can kind of introduce what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to give a little bit of history, but we're also going to learn something, which is like, that's the hope. So how many people in the room have done at least one of the Introduction to Buddhism classes? Oh, wow, good. How many people would like to do it? Okay, excellent. You can get started any time. The way it works, the way we worked it was so that there are 8 classes. There are 8 classes in the series, but you can join anywhere. We don't care if you join on class 8. Just come on down and we'll put it all in context for you, and then slowly you can collect all 8. I talked to someone this past week who said something to the effect of, "Oh, we're only missing one class." And I said, fantastic. They told me which one it was because they're always on the same schedule. Odd numbered months, one set of classes, even numbered ones. And I sent them last week for the class they wanted to pick up. They thought it was 3. And they said, we got there and we already had that one. Now we got to go the next week to get 4 because that's the one we're missing. Anyway, so it's kind of fun. You get like a little, a very tiny booklet to, as like a prize, is like a gift for finishing all 8. But the whole idea of doing the classes is interesting to me, and the fact that you all have done them and gotten something out of them. I hope anybody have something in particular they got out of a class they want to share. Just like, I learned about the life of the Buddha. Anything? Shy audience, okay, we're good. All right, so we'll catch you later then. We'll catch you near the end of the talk when we do questions. By the way, it's really fun to talk to my friends who are Christian ministers, and they say, you do questions from the audience every week? And I'm like, yeah, doesn't everybody? And they're like, anyhow. In any case, well, I think most people are afraid that if you open the mics, you'll get a debate every week, and thank you, Buddha. That has not happened too much here, but but by the same token, it's really great to discuss and to find out what you're curious about and what you want to know and what you don't know, because as you may be familiar, I'll tell you if I don't know something, for sure. I was brought up in journalism school to always state the stuff you know, but not state the stuff you don't know. So I got trained very well in college and in my professional life. So what we're going to talk about today is, where did those classes come from? How did they come to be? And why are we teaching them? And then I have a couple of announcements near the end about a Lama visit that will be happening at the end of October, where we're going to start receiving some Buddhist basics from the Tibetan tradition, from a visiting Lama. So stay tuned, more will be revealed, as my buddies like to say. So we'll start, as we usually do, with the Refuge prayer. And we'll recite it 2 times in English so we can absorb the meaning of the words, and then we'll recite it once in Tibetan so we can have the blessing of reciting it in the language it was written in. So thinking that we dedicate this time we're going to spend together to the benefit of all who suffer in this world, we'll recite. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the assembly most excellent, I take refuge until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the assembly most excellent, I take refuge until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, May I achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings. And now we'll recite it once in Tibetan. Oi sanje chudan sorki chonam la chang chu pardu dani kyap suchi daji jinso jibe sunam ki Trola penchir sanje druparsho. Okay, thank you. And now I'll begin with a short prayer and we'll begin. O Palden Sawe Lama Rinpoché, Dagi Chiwar Pede Den Shala, Kadrin Jembo Gorne Je Sunte Kusun Tugging Udrup Sal Okay, thanks everyone. I have already taught a little bit about the background of our introduction to Buddhism classes, but the reason I wanted to talk about them is so that we can kind of all appreciate the fact that that all things come from causes, which is one of the basic teachings of Buddha. When the Buddha was teaching 2,500 years ago in India, there were two popular theories about how things arose and came about in the world. One theory was that the gods made things happen, and that they were like in control of everything. And then the other popular theory was that nobody was in charge and everything was chaos. It was all chaotic. And into that atmosphere of, I guess you could say, polarized debate about the nature of the world and how things came about, walks the Buddha Shakyamuni, who had been Prince Siddhartha, the son of a warrior clan king in northern India, who ruled a small city-state in the north of India, who, after having produced, he and his wife together produced an heir to the throne, which was his job. Once he had done that, he became restless and decided that he needed to find himself. So he left home on a spiritual journey that took 6 years. He studied with all the great masters of his day, and he learned all of the yoga and meditation that was available to him in those days. And he sought the answer to the question, why is there suffering in the world? That was his job. So he wasn't able to find that answer. After having lived in luxury in the palace for more than 20, almost like 30 years, he then lived in a state of complete poverty and total deprivation on the bank of a river, sitting in the sun, meditating for hours on end. And he realized that neither in luxury nor in deprivation could he find the answer to the question, why is there suffering in the world? Because he realized it was an internal question very early, but he could not steady his mind in such a way to examine that internal question. And it wasn't until he decided to leave, so he left deprivation just like he left luxury. He decided that neither path was really for him. And so he got some nourishment, sat under the shade of a tree, and meditated very deeply. And in that meditation, he came up, he saw the answer, actually. He didn't figure it out. He experienced the illumination that we now call enlightenment or Buddhahood. And experiencing that, he saw the totality of everything. He saw why things come about. He saw how the world began. He saw everything that there was to know about his own mind and phenomena. And after some hours or maybe days, someone came upon him and said, "Oh, great sage, will you teach?" And he began to teach, and that gave birth to the teachings that we now know as Buddhism. After his death, Buddhism spread all throughout Asia, and even in the later days of the 19th and the 19th and 20th centuries, Western people began to become aware of Tibet through the work of scholars like Alexander David Neal, who took on the arduous task of trekking in Tibet when it was not allowed, and when women were looked upon as suspect. And so she went to Tibet and had the nerve to go to Tibet and ask the lamas and teachers questions about Buddhism, and then eventually brought back what she knew to her friends in Europe and began talking about Tibetan Buddhism and publishing about Tibetan Buddhism in the 1800s. Later, Buddhism had already made some inroads in American thinking because of the work of the transcendentalist poets like Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, and other people with three names. And so they had already begun talking about. I love that Thoreau said he hoped that his Christian relatives would not mind his faith in my Buddha, as he called him. They must have been on good terms. So anyhow, so there had been some Buddhist thought seeping into American society by that time. Then in the late 1800s, as Asian immigrants were brought to the United States to help build the railroads and factories, more types of Buddhism came to the United States. And then in the 1920s, there was oh my gosh, the influencers of the 1920s. Anyhow, the social influencers of the 1920s started talking about Japanese Zen Buddhism. And then there was another wave of that in the 50s when the beat poets started talking about Zen. And then again in the 70s when the first Tibetans came to the United States and started teaching, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoché and the Dalai Lama's brother, principal among them. But all of this had to really be or seem quite exotic to Americans. But because, Tibet, Buddhism, statues, stuff, I'm sure it was a little bit dizzying and hard to fathom and figure out. But the teachers stuck to the basics, the Four Noble Truths taught by the Buddha. What did he discover in his enlightenment? He discovered that suffering was part of life, suffering had a cause, suffering had a solution, and there was a path that could lead us out of suffering. And that's really what he discovered. It's very simple. Four truths that he said are known by the noble ones, meaning those who practice meditation and have a pure experience of their own mind. So suffering's part of life, we kind of get that. And we've had some, whether it's more than our share, don't know, but we've had some. But we don't really understand the cause so much because the cause is somewhat external and somewhat internal. There's a lot of external factors that go into our feeling of well-being as a human being. And the Buddha, in his enlightenment, understood that came from within the mind of an individual. And we seem to know this is true, that he said the causes of happiness and suffering are coming from inside the individual, as opposed to externals, because we've all known people, and I mentioned this last week, we've all known people who were very ill, and yet they have a very happy and contented mind. Whereas we also know people who are experiencing great privilege who are miserable. And so that means that, as my friends in 12-step like to say, happiness is an inside job, meaning that we need to work on our state of mind and to bring that state of mind to as much fruition as we can, positively. And so when the Buddha taught about the cause of suffering, he was speaking from personal experience in his own life and his own mind. The cause of suffering, he said, was fixation and clinging, which is something we do with our minds and our thoughts. We actually very willingly jump into situations because we think they will make us happy, but because we cling to a specific outcome, we are often disappointed. And that disappointment leads us to have doubts. And those doubts then lead us to self-doubt. So the idea is that the Buddha said that suffering had a cause, and it was this clinging to specific outcomes, clinging to my people, my situations, my stuff. And that in order to cut that clinging, cut the suffering, we had to cut the clinging. Well, that's the third noble truth. Because there's a cause to suffering, there's a solution. It's kind of logical. But the fourth noble truth became necessary because you can't say to somebody who's suffering, oh, just let that go. You know, you just can't say, just let that go. It's not gonna work for them. And so what you have to do is you have to find skillful and compassionate and wise ways to help people understand their situation and understand how to escape from the causes of suffering and how to nurture and expand the causes of happiness. So, I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And that's the fourth noble truth, which was the Eightfold Noble Path. But because my memory is awful, I quote the four statements. This is the teaching of the Buddha. Do no harm, practice virtue, tame your mind. Do no harm means don't hurt yourself, don't hurt others. Practice virtue means take care of yourself and benefit others. And tame the mind, it means to meditate so that we know what is beneficial and what is not. So this was the Dharma that came to America. But as you can see, this very simple Dharma was what people related to. They maybe didn't relate so much to the Buddhist art or those hours and hours of quiet sitting that was part of the Zen tradition, you know, or all of the mantra chanting that's part of the Tibetan tradition. They probably didn't connect as well to that because it's a cultural problem. It's a cultural thing. Although I would venture to say that anybody who has gone out to dinner with friends and found yourself suddenly singing Broadway show tunes because everybody knew the same song, you get an idea of how your mood can be lifted by chanting and music and things like this. I still feel that someday Broadway will save the world because two combatants will look at each other and say, "Do you hear the people sing in the song?" Okay, so anyway, so I mean, because it could happen. I think it's possible with the right group of people, you know. The whole thing could dissolve into either a Bollywood or a Broadway, you know. It could be done. Anyhow, but so now these Buddhists who came from China, who came from Japan, who came from Tibet to the United States had to figure out how to talk to us. They knew we resonated with the basic ideas, Four Noble Truths, quiet meditation, do no harm, practice virtue, ahimsa, the whole thing, right? They knew they resonated, but how were they going to explain all of this in a way that was going to work with our lifestyle? You know, we're busy. And so everybody tried something different. I won't say but a lot of people tried different things. One particular teacher had all of their Tibetan teacher, well, let me go back before I go into the experiments that they worked on us. Anyhow, so if we go back to how Dharma students, Buddhism students were trained in Tibet, let's just go back there for a second in history. In Tibet, there were 2 or 3 systems of teaching students about the teachings of the Buddha and the meditation practices, the various chanting and sitting and compassion meditation practices. One system was in a monastery where everybody who comes to the monastery is a monastic. They decide they take vows not to marry and not to be involved in householder life, and they stay in the monastery, and so forth and so on. And then it's more collegial because they go through periods, they go through class periods, and they also do practices together and do lots of chanting and meditation together in the monastic setting. That was one setting. That particular setting was probably not transferable to the United States, because a lot of people these days, they don't look at monasticism as being like a career path. Their parents might not like it, for example, or they may get some pushback from their friends. You're going to do what? Which reminds me, I've asked a couple of my Western monastic friends to come here and talk about that. So we're going to have guest speakers at some point to talk about what it means to be American and monastic. It's very interesting. So it really wasn't going to be viable as a method for training Dharma students in the United States. It just wasn't going to work. So the Tibetan teachers had to the other system that I was going to talk about was the village Lama system. Not all villages had a Lama living in them, a great master of meditation and Dharma. But some did, and they would, these village Lamas would be good for, everything. Blessings for babies and marriages and blessings for cows that are sick, and they would do everything. One great village Lama, Karma Chakme, who lived in the 17th century, wrote 60 Tibetan volumes of all the things a village Lama can do, and then some. So that was a system, and people would go individually to the Lama and get an individualized education program. They all had IEPs. Those of you who know, if you know, you know. So everybody had an IEP, but the general gist was that the village Lama, being a wise person, would be able to advise the students about what to practice and how to do it. So now we can go. The third system was sort of like a hybrid of the two, where there were like mountain yogis, like in the cartoons. There really were mountain yogis living out in the wilderness, and people would actually, yes, climb mountains, and yes, they would go ask the wise person to teach them, and that would happen. But it was probably not preferred, Although if you read the life of Milarepa, you will read about his encounters with lots of interesting random people. Yeah, a lot of the stories of the great master Milarepa, who was a mountain yogi, his life is full of these stories of like chance people, randos, who just walk by. Oh, hi, They say, what's going on here, And there's another one that Lama Karma talked about when he was here a few weeks ago, where Milarepa's sitting in meditation and a deer runs by. And then a dog is following. And it's starting to get interesting now, And the deer turns around and comes back and sits next to Milarepa. And then the dog sits down next to Milarepa. And the next thing you know, the hunter is panting up the track, and he's like, what's going on here? Did you bewitch those animals? What's happening? And so that's how Milarepa got one of his grandest disciples from a rando who just came by while he's sitting and meditating. So anyway, you get the idea. So those were the three basic systems: monastic, village, and mountain yogis. Well, okay, so can you translate any of those to the United States? Not easily, not easily. So a Tibetan Lama came here in the 1970s. He spoke fluent English. This was Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoché, and he spoke fluent English. And he really had an understanding for Western culture because he had studied Western culture in a Western college as the result of a scholarship that was given to him. And so he understood the Western psychology. And so he thought that the best thing to do for Westerners was to get them to sit down and be quiet. You think? So he had all of his hippie students, okay? These were hippies who were, taking drugs and wearing unusual clothes and like being sort of counterculture people. He took all of these counterculture people and told them to wear suits, dress up. And they're like, why? And he said, because you're a Buddha inside. You have Buddha nature. Dress up. Act the part. And they're all like, okay, sure. And so that's how his initial movement was born, was from these hippies who he actually sort of tamed, like Milarepa tamed the deer, the dog, and eventually the hunter, just with the power of his understanding. But that's a rare situation, very rare situation. But people had to kind of follow along, and so everybody was put into a meditation situation where they had to sit and meditate and be quiet for hours and hours and hours. They had to keep track in a book how many hours, and then they could move on if they had done a certain number of hours. And so that worked, and he built a really good size organization. But like all organizations, it had some problems, but the teachings, which he wrote in the books that he published, are still accessible and quite easy to understand. But now we have the Lama who was the founder of our center, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoché. Yeah, you can show to the people at home. We have a picture. I didn't want to bring the whole TV out for just one picture, but you'll see his picture at the back of the hall here. He was sent to the United States by a very sort of, we would call him straight arrow, traditional lineage teacher. Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoché was in his own way sort of counterculture, and that he didn't do the monastic system for people. He didn't do the village Lama system, and he definitely didn't do the mountain yogi system, except in magnetizing people to him who were unusual. So he had to create a new system. So the new system that he created had to do with meditation, get them to sit down and be quiet, and not teach them anything about all of the mantras and visualization practices. Just wait until they had been thoroughly processed by their quiet sitting before you would even think about teaching them mantra or visualization. And so that lasted for quite a long time, and there are still, the organization is still existent in some form today. And in fact, there was a center here, and there still is, I believe, but at that time it was quite large. And our little enclave following Khenpo Karthar Rinpoché was quite small. But that's okay. It all worked out. We survived. Even though we were small, we survived. And so Khenpo Karthar Rinpoché had to figure out, well, how am I going to do this? Can't do monastery, can't do mountain yogi, can't do village lama, so what am I going to do? He did a combination. He did, like Chogyam Trungpa, teach everyone meditation, because he said, a lot of people hearing about Buddhism for the first time, a lot of them don't really have a lot of confidence in it, because it's outside their realm of experience. They don't have any confidence in it. He said, but what I found, he said, was from teaching my first few students meditation, that after they meditated for a while, he said they began to get the idea that there was more to their mind than just their thoughts. Because what do you do in meditation? Thoughts arise, you make note of them, you let them go, and you return your attention to the breath or whatever object of meditation you have. And by doing that, you take the wind out of the sails of all those random thoughts, and that you cultivate attention, calm, and quiet. You cultivate it. It's not perfect. You'll have a few minutes of it. It's good. Because he said that gave them confidence that the rest of Buddhism was worth exploring. So he said, every person who does meditation, he said, even if it's just for an instant, will experience their mind in a different way. They're not going to become Buddha in a minute. But what they will do, he said, is get confidence that what we're telling them about their mind is accurate, that their mind has the capacity to relax and be attentive at the same time. And so they will then have more confidence as to what you're saying about the Four Noble Truths. They'll have more confidence because they'll know that it comes from something genuine that they have experienced for themselves, which is their mind. So that was what he did. But then he combined that with being like the world's best village Lama, because people would go to him and say, look, I've got this problem, and can you help me? And he said he helped them all to the best of his ability. And he even started teaching us. He said, what you got to do with people who first come in, he said many of them just have a lot of questions. Just sit with them and let them tell you their story. And then listen to what they have to say, and then respond in whatever genuinely compassionate way you can. And see if you can be of help to them. So he was trying to create many little, village lamas to help listen to people. But he was also able to give them incredible advice. Oh, you've got a problem with anger? Here, let's do compassion mantra. Oh, you've got a problem with this, let's do this, and this practice. And you've got a problem with that, let's do this practice. And so forth. And he was really good at it. He was very gifted and very good at it. So what he eventually created here was meditation for everybody, then added with getting advice from people who were a little farther down the path than us. And it seemed to work, and here we are. And that is how this community came about, was from this combination of factors. How do you train Western people whose lives and minds are incredibly busy? You get them to quiet down for a minute, then you start to give them information about how their mind works and how they produce their own reality with their mind. And then over time, you can begin to teach them things about mantra and visualization to help them come to become acquainted with their inner Buddha, the inner part of themselves that has always been there and always been pure, 100% pure, 100% good, 100% wise. Their innermost being, slowly they will come to believe that that innermost being is there. And then you'll be able to help them nurture it and bring it out. And along the way, we realized that people needed some basic education. In the 12th century, one of our teachers in our tradition, Gampopa, wrote a little encyclopedia about like that big called The Ornament of Precious Liberation. Ornament, one of my friends who's a Canadian guy who is a Tibetan translator, he said, whenever you see the word ornament in a title, know that you are in for lots of scripture quotes. And sure enough, Gampopa, living in the 12th century, decided to write a graded path of study and practice. He wrote a syllabus for us in the 12th century. Do this, do this, do this, do this, and do this. And enlightenment is at this end. And, ordinariness is at this end, enlightenment's at this end. And we're like, wow, really? Cool. And so Khenpo Karthar Rinpoché taught that gradually. You'll see it in his book, Dharma Paths. He teaches the basic topics of the jewel ornament in his book, Dharma Paths. So that's why we give it to everybody to read, because he shows us the path and how we can gradually undertake that path for ourselves. And then, over time, there were people at the home monastery of Karmatriana Dharmachakra in Woodstock, New York, who wanted to get a for-real syllabus. And so they asked the Dzogchen Ponlop Rinpoché, one of the close disciples of Khenpo Rinpoche's guru's circle of students. The 16th Karmapa was who sent Khenpo Karthar Rinpoché to the United States in 1976. And he started teaching in 77. And the Karmapa came several times. The 16th Karmapa came several times, including to Columbus in 1980. You'll hear more about that soon, because we're going to be celebrating the 45th anniversary of the Karmapas coming to Columbus in a few weeks. So we created, Dzogchen Ponlop Rinpoché created our very first curriculum that we still use parts of today in our classes, our 8 classes. The first 4 classes are based on his work. And just recently, KTD Monastery taught everything. Pretty much, they have not totally finished teaching Ponlop Rinpoche's curriculum, but they're getting close. They're closing in on it now after a couple of years, doing video classes on Wednesday nights. So in that way, we have the best of all worlds. We have the quiet sitting meditation. We have the village Lama aspect, and that the teachers here do their best to help and give advice. And then we have the Lamas who live at our home monastery to help advise in areas where we cannot. And so we have the capacity to study freely. We don't have to fill in a book. That was Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's gift to us. We didn't have to fill in a book with hundreds of hours of meditation before he would let us go on to the next level. He would help us to decide when we were ready for the next level and would give them to us when we were ready. So such a gifted individual is rare, so the rest of us have to kind of do it with our wits and figuring it out with the student. But Rinpoche just instantly knew what exactly every person needed. And that's why I feel that his gift to us was trusting us. To me, that was the biggest gift he gave us, was trusting us to be able to hold these centuries. I mean, like the tradition we belong to is 2,500 years old in the main, the main parts of it. The Buddhism is 2,500 years old, and the meditation techniques of Mahamudra are 1,000 years old, which is the main type of meditation our branch of Tibetan Buddhism nurtures and teaches. That's 1,000 years, and he took this 1,000-year-old tradition and handed it to us. So now we've got to hang on to it. Now we get to practice it. Are we Tibetan? No. Is there a cross-cultural mismatch? Yes. And so we have cross-cultural problems. But by the same token, there's this incredible trust that Khenpo Rinpoche had for us as intelligent people who could figure out what to do with what we were being given. And each individual one of us, like the hunter that came panting up the path to see this strange mountain yogi who had bewitched his animals, we can sit and discover our own inner being through the methods that he gave us. And by giving us and trusting us, we've developed a practice and a practice curriculum of meditation, sitting meditation, followed by learning compassion meditation, followed by learning mantra meditation, followed by learning Mahamudra meditation. I mean, we've figured out how to train people. It still takes time, and most folks are like, "Can I do this in 6 weeks?" And I'm like, no. But you'll enjoy every minute of it. It'll take longer than that, but you'll enjoy every minute of it. Well, most minutes of it. And so it's still a thing in process, because of course, this comes from Tibet. So there's going to be lots of Tibetan language and stuff and ideas, and some people wear funny clothes, and it's going to be like that. It's going to be like that for a good long time. But that's okay, because, they trusted us. We're smart. We can do this. And so anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about today, that what we went through, what the Lamas went through to bring the Dharma to us. Because I got into that in the previous talk where I said they escaped from a totalitarian state, and they escaped to refugee camps where many of them got sick and died in India and Nepal. But the ones who survived were able to build monasteries in the countries where they were refugees. And they were able to establish residency and monasteries there. that are still existing today. And then they were allowed to come to see us in America, and they've established institutions, which so far so good, right, guys? So that's all I wanted to talk about today, because I just wanted these 2 classes to give you some historical background. And if you have any questions about this, or if you want to talk about other things in Dharma, or maybe something you heard in a class that you'd like to ask about, I'm happy to address those, because we have a few minutes, and then at the last 5 minutes, I'll give you the news, the most recent news about what's coming for us. Questions, thoughts? Yeah, question microphones are on either side. Yeah. Yeah, there you go.
Thank you, Lama Kathy. So I ask your forgiveness in advance. I'm going to get on my soapbox for a second, and I trust you to keep me in check. This is sort of a prayer request for the poor spotted lanternfly. I don't know if you've seen the media about this, but there are these scarlet and gray moths that are invading America.
Yeah.
And the message that we're getting from the media to average citizens everywhere is, if you see one, stomp on it, kill it.
I know.
And these poor creatures are here through no fault of their own. Humans brought them here.
Yeah.
And I really don't think telling everyday people that they should stomp on them is going to make a difference.
I get that.
If you own an orchard, if you own a vineyard, you might have a problem that you need to deal with. But I don't know, if for some reason this has struck my heart in a deep way.
Yeah.
Not only for the lanternflies, but for the bad karma that people will accrue when they see another sentient being, and the first thing that pops into their mind is to stomp on it.
Yeah.
So I don't know, I offer that to you, just get your comment and see.
Yeah, I really appreciate you bringing this up, and I tend to think that journalists, we come from a really interesting family. If not like our family of origin, but we come from a place, and I do feel that not all journalists, but many journalists are not in it for the money, because you don't get paid anything, and so forth. But you do make connections between things, and I think the majority of us are kind of tender-hearted. You know what I mean? And I think that's good. That's a good quality. And we shouldn't be mad about that. Because the reason I'm saying this is because in, 1980-something, I was attending a very unusual funeral. And I will forget, because I attended 2 or 3 really unusual funerals that were so unusual they were covered by the media. And I can't remember which one this was. If it was the guy who wanted to be brought to the cemetery in a motorcycle biker caravan, or if it was something else, But I observed a 2 or 3-year-old child looking at walking amongst the stones with her mom, and she saw a snake, little one, garter snake, and she was very curious about it and wanted to see it, and her mother said, No, don't touch that. It's bad. No. We usually we kill snakes. And I wrote a whole column about that. I wrote 17 column inches about what happened in that moment when a 2-year-old found out that the world could be dangerous. So I kind of had my moment on this too. And I think that we have a problem in general, because it all comes back to samsara being a web of suffering, of interconnected suffering. And some people are suffering because they're the killers, and some people are suffering because they're being killed. And we're going to talk about animals and insects now. Because human beings, that's kind of off the table. I'm praying that there will never be a Buddhist war. I'm praying that there will never be one. There may have been some difficulties in Tibet where rival warlords wanted to grab each other's properties, including monasteries. It's a problem. But anyway, so I think that we've got a problem, because we have to look at what's happening. It is a It's a dirty, rotten shame. It's a dirty, rotten shame that human beings are being told to kill things. But the problem is also going to be bad if they really are ravenous and destroy food and safety for the people who are living in the locality they infest. And so they've probably been, as a species, have probably been hated everywhere they've ever gone, like snakes. Hated everywhere. I mean, what's the karma to be born as a species that somebody hates? Because in this life, they're innocent to us. They're just flying in clouds because they hang out together. And, and they're eating everything because that's what they do. That's their job, is to eat stuff and reproduce and make more lanternflies. That's their job. So the only thing I can say is that, yes, it is a dirty, rotten shame. That people have to be, journalists have to tell people to kill things. I think it's terrible because we don't have any other way to do it now. Hopefully there will be a time when we can figure out something smarter than this. I mean, there's gotta be a better way than just having people stomp individual things. But I gotta confess, when I was in Asia, and I did take my malaria preventative, I killed mosquitoes. I'm sorry, Buddha. Because, from my point of view, it was them or me. But was I right? Don't think so. But His Holiness the Dalai Lama gave a talk one time, or an interview to a journalist one time. And he said, I try never to kill anything, even by accident. He said, but I've got a problem. He said, mosquitoes. He said, sometimes I kill a mosquito. He said, then I have to sit up for quite a while. If it's in the middle of the night, I have to sit up in bed for quite a while and recite purification mantras because of what I just did. So it's like, we've got a problem, and it's living in a world where this kind of stuff happens. And we can feel for the bugs, and we can feel for the journalists who have to tell people to kill the bugs, and we have to we have to feel for everybody and make the aspiration that in the future, none of them will have this kind of suffering. But do we say to everyone, don't kill them? I don't know what to do. I'm a little bit confused. If you have any, I'm serious. If you have any thoughts about this, because I'm just talking about, it's a dirty, rotten shame.
Well, my thoughts about it are that large-scale agriculture can take care of what they need to do. And I've seen videos online of ground wasps attacking the spotted lanternfly and praying mantises attacking them. Mm-hmm. And I've also seen coverage that there's now a new type of honey that has never existed in America before because the honeybees are feeding off the liquid remains that comes from the lanternfly and bringing it back to the... So I don't know, I guess my personal view is individual people are not gonna stop this invasion. I pray that people will not feel compelled to murder these little flies. Yeah. But yeah, I'm a gardener. We've talked about it before. I'm a gardener, and when slugs are attacking my lettuce, it's a different story. But something about the mass media message of when you see one stomp on it, I don't know. For some reason, it feels different than when you're protecting your own food growing than just like walking down the sidewalk and stomping. Anyway, I'll stop rambling.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I am super glad you brought it up. And the reason I'm super glad that he brought it up is because this is how complicated it is to live in a world that's like this. It is incredibly complex. And it's very painful, which is why I think the Buddha was right when he said we have to become clear in our, become clear in our own minds about who we are and what we are doing, and take responsibility for that which we do, like the Dalai Lama who sat up after he killed the mosquitoes. It's like, take responsibility for what we do. And so at the very least, we can do that, Yeah, so, but I really appreciate you bringing it up, because I told the story previously about one of my friends. He's passed away now. He was part of this center for years and years. He was a math professor at Ohio State, and his classroom was being terrorized by a hornet. Because it was in the days, no air conditioning. They had the windows open. The hornet flies in and starts to buzz over people's heads, and it's freaking people out. And he has to, he's the teacher. He's got to kind of like do something. So he gets a stack of papers. He rolls them up, and he goes and he kills the hornet. And he said, I felt terrible about that. I feel horrible about that. He said, this is the difficulty of being a Buddhist in the modern world. He said, I had to do it for my students, but, because I couldn't just say live and let live, so it's like I had to do what I had to do, but I felt bad about it, he said, which I think is good. He said, what would have been bad, he said, is that if I had done this thing and then felt great about it, that's one less hornet in the world. We can see how we respond to things. You see, it's like, who are we in this situation? So I'm really glad you brought it up. Yeah. Okay, next. Oh gosh, yes, you'll be the last question here. I'm sorry, did you have something to say? Okay, very good. And you can check with me after, okay? Because I saw another hand go up, and yes.
Oh, thank you for giving that history of all the different things that have taken place for us to be here in this moment and get to learn this really cool stuff that helps us in our lives so much. But
it's true.
I wanted to kind of go back to when you were talking about the Eightfold Path, and then the kind of 4 bullet points that we use. The phrase "tame your mind." Early on, I kind of found it to be counterintuitive because when you hear "tame your mind" coming into Buddhism and not having as much experience of what that might mean, I kind of thought like, I need to cultivate more positive thoughts. I need to not be wandering off and being in the present moment. That's what I thought kind of tame your mind was. But as I've meditated more and done more reading, I kind of started to learn that it's just noticing kind of what reality is, and that you're going to get lost in thought, and that's okay. And noticing that everything is kind of just arising on its own, and that you don't need to. You can have a negative thought, or you can be lost in thought, and to get upset that haven't tamed your mind to where that doesn't happen is almost counterintuitive. I don't know if I'm kind of on the right track with that. It's been helpful and a lot to just realize that I don't need to have control of everything that's going in my head or anything like that. And am I kind of on the right path there? Can you kind of speak to that?
I think so, and I'll tell you why. I think that there's some similarity to these two questions, because being able to live consciously instead of kind of, living unconsciously, kind of floating through the world like, neurons. I think that living consciously, you do feel a little more responsibility for the things that you think and do. And that's not a bad thing. That's actually kind of a good thing, because at first, when people start doing meditation, they tell me, like, a lot of the times they'll say things like, oh man, my thoughts are so out of control. But then gradually through meditation, those thoughts begin to not bother them as much, and they no longer feel that their thoughts are out of control. And I think that what you're talking about is like the next stage beyond that, which is where you're learning how to take one step back when stuff comes at you, and just it's like tenths of a second, just back up for like 1 second and look at your thoughts as though you were an outside observer, and then be able to say, okay, if I do this, this is who I become, and if I do that, that is what I become, and I'm going to choose this one or over that one, because this is kinder and better and good, like that. Yes, we can all, as human beings, because we got these brains, they're incredibly complex and they can do lots of stuff. Because we have these amazing brains, we might get dazzled by the choices. One of my buddies, he called it analysis paralysis. That was really smart, right? He says when you're trying to outthink yourself and try to figure everything out, when it's not figurable. So it's like that. So I would say that being able to see where you are in a situation and make good choices based on your ethics. Because that's the other half of the equation. Seeing things arise in the mind and disappear in the mind, you get the idea that, okay, I can begin, this reality that I am experiencing is workable. I can work with it. I can engage it and work with it. Like, here's something that happened. I lost my temper with somebody yesterday, and I felt real bad about it. And then I was able to instantly say to the person after I was cross with them, I am really sorry about that. That's not who I want to be. Because I didn't have like some kind of idea like, oh, I'm a Lama, I have to like pretend that I'm right all the time, you know, because that was not right. I shouldn't have been cross with that person. And it was not right. And I just had to say, no, that was my bad. I said, I don't know how to fix this, but I will keep working with it. Because I don't know how to fix it. Because there's some things that, you know, even after all these years, it just, you know, I go from 0 to 60 and I can't do anything about it. But slowly, I do want it to come and be more manageable. And being able to like just stop and then choose to do something different. That's a powerful thing. And if we can then, alongside that capacity, this is where I was heading and I forgot. I got lost in the story and forgot to come back. You know, journalism, am I right? You know, you're doing an interview and the person gets you off and then you have to like come back to the subject in a nice way. It's really something. Anyhow, I have to do that with myself now. So the moment by moment by moment awareness, that's the cool thing. But then you also have to have like, it's like a stream. The Buddha talked about our being as being a stream of being. You know, it's not like a material soul. That was kind of like not his explanation, that we were always adding to and subtracting from our thoughts, feelings, and emotions. But the banks of this river, I made that analogy up. This is not a Buddhist teaching. This is me trying to cope with how my mind works. We train ourselves in Buddhism specifically in love, compassion, devotion, and wisdom, and ethics, not harming. And that's like the banks of this stream, the banks of this river that determines where it's going. And so while letting go of clinging to the present moment, you know, just being in the present moment, while giving up that clinging, at the same time, we have to build a view of the world that is healthy and is ethical and is compassionate and hopefully eventually wise. So we have to have both of those things going at the same time.
That's really cool. That's a great way to put it. Thank you.
All right, no, thank you. So I appreciate the questions and so on. So just a little bit of news. At the end of October, we were supposed to have Khenpo Urgyen Tenzin visit us to teach on the Heart Sutra. I'm sorry to tell you that program has been postponed to 2026 because he was invited to go overseas for a very special conference and to receive a very special reading transmission and blessing from the high lamas of the tradition. So he's not being available kind of put us in a pickle. And so we just chose that he will come next year to teach on this. We don't know when, but he is going to come to do that. However, Khenpo Sanjay Trinley, his translator, his longtime translator, Khenpo Sanjay Trinley has translated for several different lamas here. He will be coming and he will be presenting instead. He's going to do 4 nights of programming. I just heard from him yesterday. We've added a 4th night. So we get to do 4 nights, evenings of programs with him. On Monday, I said Monday, I'm sorry, on Tuesday, the October 27th, he will be teaching on how is Buddhism relevant to us today? And, you know, what can it teach us today in this modern world? The second evening, he's going to be teaching on the Mahamudra lineage supplication, which those of you who attend our chant program on Chenrezig on Tuesday nights, well, you'll have recited it every week forever and ever, and you'll wonder, well, what does it mean? and like how do we approach the highest teaching while still being ordinary people. And so that will be actually applicable to anybody who has tried to meditate but had a struggle. So anyway, so first is about Buddhism in the modern world. Second is how do we apply meditation in a very difficult situation. And then the last two are going to be the first chapter of Gampopa's Ornament of Precious Liberation. He's going to teach about Buddha nature for 2 evenings. So that's Tuesday, October 27th. He'll be teaching on Buddhism in the world, modern world. Second, the 28th, Wednesday the 28th, he will be teaching, did I get that right? No, I have to go look it up, baby. I forgot. Monday, does he arrive Monday? He arrives Monday and leaves Friday. I got it all wrong. Read the newsletter. I got to read, yeah, y'all can read the newsletter, but I want to help you. He's arriving on Monday the 27th. He will teach that night. Tuesday, the 28th, he will start on on meditation, the Mahamudra meditation, and how ordinary people can approach it. On the 29th and 30th, that's the Wednesday and Thursday, he will teach about Buddha nature and how we all have it. And these are all evening programs. They will be simulcast on Zoom. So if people can't be here, and they will be recorded. And he said he would also do interviews, practice interviews for people who wanted to learn and talk about their practice. So that will be, I'm very excited about that. So, and then next time I talk, we'll talk a little bit about the big event that's going to come on Wednesday, November 5th, as we celebrate the 45th anniversary of the Karmapas coming to Columbus. So anyway, more will be revealed. So we'll stop here for today. And we'll dedicate, this is a very Buddhist thing to do, we'll dedicate the goodness of our session with the dedication prayer. And we'll only recite this in English because we've run over a bit. So we'll start with the words, by this merit, and dedicate all that we have done toward the liberation of all beings. By this merit, may all attain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy, wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. The courageous Manjushri, who knows everything as it is, Samantabhadra, who also knows in the same way, and all the bodhisattvas, that I may follow in their path, I completely dedicate all this virtue. Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thanks to the Shrine team and thanks to the AV team. Thank you all.